Hi everyone, I'm Jesse at Strobepro.com, and today I'm going to be showing you the Godox DPiiiV. This is a strobe that's available in 400 and 600 watt seconds. It's completely redesigned with an LED modeling lamp, as well as new build construction on the outside. So let's take a closer look what this strobe is all about. So another Godox strobe, I can hear you saying, which one do I get? Where does this light fit into the current Godox lineup? What should I do? There's so many options. Well, I would say that this is an intermediate light that is a very affordable option. It's not on the lower end like the MS series, and it's not quite at the top of the line, which is the QTIII series. It fits really nicely right in the middle. It's got a number of features that you would find on higher strobes. It's got a low-end power of 1/64, which is 7 stops, which is really nice because on a lot of comparable strobes, on the lower end, you're only going to get to 1/16 or maybe 1/32. But one of the really nice things about this is it has a 30-watt LED modeling lamp, and we'll show you that in a couple minutes. But this thing is really bright. Gone are the days of having to replace that modeling lamp and breaking them with softbox speed rings or anything like that. So that's a really nice feature of it. It's full metal construction here. We have the same mounting adapter on the bottom of it that is basically off the pro level battery strobes. So there's just a number of things. It fits really nicely. And again, the affordability, if you're just getting into strobes, this is a great option. Or if you're just moving up the line, I would recommend this strobe as well. It's priced really nice for what you get. Let's get right into unboxing this light. And as you can see, we have the newer white Godox boxes, which they have recently switched to in the past year. And inside here, we're going to have our top tray, and that's going to have our power cable. So Godox has also recently started putting the retaining strap on there. You have the Godox manual, which is usually absolutely useless. And you have a couple fuses. Keep these in a safe place just in case you ever need those. Moving on from there, the only thing else I have in there is the light itself. And as I mentioned before, we are unboxing the 400. On the 600 watt second version, everything is identical. The only thing you're going to notice is basically the logo on the outside telling you that it's a 600, giving you 200 watts more of power. Now, one of the really stupid things that Godox, I think, did is keep the same cover on the front. The reason why that is stupid is because we now have an LED modeling lamp in there that does not need this long cover. So if you're the kind of person that is trying to save space in a bag, you can see we don't need all of that room in that cover anymore. So hopefully Godox will change that soon, and you can pick up an optional cover if you just want the short one to save some space in a bag. But the first thing you want to do before you do anything like I just did there is take off that cover. The worst thing you can do is plug this in, especially if you're new, you've never used a strobe, turn this on, the modeling lamp's on there, and you start melting this foam right away. And believe me, it will melt very quick, and you can smell it before you even know that you've made that mistake. So anyway, this is a Bowens mount, so you just pull this lever on the side, give it a quarter turn, and it's going to come off just like any other Bowens mount accessory. So the biggest thing you're going to notice about this light right away, like I mentioned, is there is no long protruding modeling lamp anymore. We've gone from that incandescent 150 to a 30-watt COB LED. And the really nice thing, this draws way less power, but it gives you just as much brightness as that previous modeling lamp, but you're not going to be breaking it off. That was the biggest thing people would do with a traditional modeling lamp, is you're trying to put a speed ring on, you hit it, and it snaps off. So gone are those days. You'll never have to replace this. It'll last longer than the flash tube, so it's not like every couple years you're replacing an actual modeling lamp. Taking a look at the mounting mechanism at the bottom here, this is straight off of the AD600 Pro, so one of the top of the line battery strobes, and it's really nice that it's made its way to the DPiiiV here. And the reason why I really like this is it's solid metal, there's no chance of it flexing or breaking or anything. And you get a stepless, really smooth design. So some of the lower end strobes would have like the clicker on there, which is fine, but if you wanted to accurately get that right into position, that click might just be a little bit off. With this, it's no worry, just set it wherever you want, it's completely smooth, lock it into place, and you are good to go. You can also reposition the locking handle. You just push this down if it's in the way of a modifier or something, and turn it, it'll lock right back in there, and then you can use it, crank it, put it wherever you want. The other nice thing is that folds perfectly flush. So you can see this seam right here. It just saves space. Some of the older handle or older locking mechanism designs were a lot bigger and clunkier, but we're always trying to save space to get this to fit into a bag. So I just really like this mounting system here. Basically, you just have a locking thumb screw on here, and you can actually remove this thumb screw. If for some reason you wanted to mount this straight on a stand like that, you just move this thumb screw over there, but typically you're going to be putting it on a spigot vertically so you can get the most amount of tilt. But you do have that option on the new mount. So let's just reposition that out of the way and take a look at the back. Going back here, just under the handle, we have a fan port. Up on the front, the cooling ports for the fan are right around here. Plus, we actually have our heat sink for the LED itself. And then just a couple more cooling ports back here for the capacitors. One of the things we actually like here at Strobepro is that they've moved the power port where you plug this in. They've separated it. Most of the lights you plug right into the back, it's right there. But if this ever gets damaged or anything, then it can be a pain to fix. So they've moved it right down, it's separate. It helps us out if this ever gets damaged, if a light falls in the wind or something like that, we can easily replace that now. But on the back screen here, it's pretty simple. We just have one dial that's going to control our power. It'll control the power of the actual strobe itself, plus the LED modeling lamp, and just a couple of simple buttons, which we'll go over in a second. The only other thing to really mention on the outside, on the top here, you'll see this little red square. This is our optical port, so this light can be fired optically by another light, but you're going to want to use this with a Godox trigger, something like the new XPROII. But it is backwards compatible as well, so I should just mention that actually this port here that looks like a little USB port, that is not for firmware upgrades or anything. That's for older legacy triggers. If you are still using like the XT16, for example, Godox continues to make all of their new lights with this backwards compatible trigger port. You shouldn't be using that trigger anymore, to be honest with you. There's many better options like the X2T, the X Pro, the XPROII. Upgrade your trigger if you're still using the old one, and you'll be happy that you did. And then literally the only other thing on the body here is just our release for our accessories, which we'll go over mounting that in a second now. Mounting this strobe is very easy. As I mentioned before, you're just going to take your handle, loosen this off so it goes vertical, and then tighten it back. Retract the thumb screw. You don't have to take it all the way out. And I'm just going to be mounting this just on a Strobepro micro roller with the wheels taken off, just so I can demo it on the table easily. But this strobe does have a little bit of weight to it. I would recommend at least a Strobepro 9-foot air cushion stand for this. You could go to a 10 if you want. The 7-foot, I would say, is like the absolute minimum. Pick up the 9 and you'll be happy with that. So it fits on any spigot here, and we have our flat-sided spigots. So when you use a Strobepro flat-sided spigot, you just line up the screw to the flat side, and this prevents any twisting at all when you lock that in. So I'm just tightening that on there, and I can actually spin this around if I want so you guys can see it a little bit better. One thing I want to mention is that some of the photos on the website show a 7-inch reflector. Godox does not include reflectors with most of their strobes now. And the reflector that you want to pick up if you want to use an umbrella or the Strobepro grid set, for example, is the Godox ADR6. This is a 7-inch reflector that has a little lip so you can put our Strobepro grids right into it. But the biggest thing why you want to get this specific reflector is if you want to use it with an umbrella. You can see right here there's a punch out. I'm not going to punch that out. What it is, it's a slot for the umbrella to go through. And that is going to correspond to the slot, if I just spin this around again for you actually, to this slot right here where the umbrella slides through. So what we would do is line that slot up with the umbrella slot so it goes like that, put our reflector in here, click it in, and now the umbrella is going to go through here and then into the slot on the mount. There's nothing you have to tighten on that mount or anything. It's just friction in there. So if you slide it in, it'll grab it and you'll be good to go. Let's talk about the Bowens mount for a second. Now, I already mentioned it before. The cover is Bowens mount. This reflector is Bowens mount. It's really the easiest system to attach different modifiers. So whether it's the optional reflector like this, or you pick up a softbox, and this is just a small rapid snap. And this is part of our new series, the easiest softbox on the market to set up. It also has a Bowens mount. So I'm going to spin this guy back around here, and I'm just going to tilt it up so I don't have to switch to a bigger stand. But it's all the exact same way. And I'll just tighten these up because I loosen them. You're just going to go line the 3 prongs up here, and I'll just loosen this speed ring a bit so I can modify or spin that around. So line them up, quarter turn, it's going to click into place, and then you can adjust this wherever you want. Now, obviously, this is a small 2x2 softbox. We have tons of different size softboxes. And whether you're using the DP 400 watt second or the DP 600 watt second, again, the version 3V, this will power any of our biggest softboxes. So you could run a 60-inch Octobox, 47, whatever you want. You've got plenty of power to fill that modifier. So it's just as easy to take it off. Again, we have that lever on the side. Make sure you grab the speed ring. You don't want to break a modeling lamp off or anything. Pull that quarter turn the other way. Make sure your thumb screw is tightened. Quarter turn the other way. Release it. And with our rapid snap again, they're super easy. Fold down, throw them in the bag, and you're off to your next shoot. We're ready to plug in the strobe now, but just before I do that, I just wanted to mention about the fuses that we looked at when we unboxed. The place for those is just under right here. There's a little tray. So if you take a little flat bladed screwdriver, you just pop it up in there and just kind of pry it out like this. There's a fuse tray that slides out. There's one fuse that powers it, and then there's actually a spare there as well. And then you have your 2 spares that actually come with the light. Chances are you're probably never going to have to use that, but if you do, that is where it's located. So we're just going to take the power cable and plug that in straight into the back, and our power switch is directly under the dial. So when we fire that up, we're going to see a bunch of things on the back here, and we're going to go through each and every button. So right away, probably what you're going to want to do is spin this dial. It's just intuitive. This adjusts the power. So it goes all the way up to 1/1 and all the way down to 1/64. And that's actually really nice. A lot of strobes in this price range would only be like 1/16 or 1/32. So having 7 full stops, and you can see that they were adjustable in 1/10 increments as well. And if you don't like that, I'm going to show you a little bit later how we can adjust that on the controller. One thing you'll notice right away is that this light starts blinking. The strobe does not have auto dump, so normally that doesn't really matter because you're going to be controlling this wirelessly on a controller like the XPROII, for example. But if you see this blinking, it means that you need to dump that charge, so you would just hit the button here, or you would hit the test button on the actual controller. So speaking of controllers, there are a number of ways that we can fire this light. So let's talk about a couple of the options here. Right here, you're going to see this USB port, and this is for older legacy controllers. Chances are you're probably not using that anymore, but Godox continues to make that on all of their new strobes, just in case you were using a controller like the XT16, for example. Beside that, we have our 3.5 millimeter PC sync port. That's if you want to plug a cable in there and then into the PC port on your actual camera. Now, just be advised that not every camera has a PC sync port anymore, and moving forward, they will probably start even discontinuing those even more. They're just not used that much anymore. But if you shoot school photos or something, you just don't want to deal with triggers, then you can plug that cable in, which is sold separately. Next, over here, we have our optical triggering mode. And as I mentioned before, up on the top, that little red square that we saw earlier, that's the optical sensor. So when this is enabled, if I push it once, you're going to see S1 pop up on the screen right up there. Now this strobe is looking for another flash to trigger it. That can be any flash, whether it's a pop-up flash on your camera, another speed light, another strobe, it doesn't really matter. So if I turn on this V1 right here, what I'm going to do, just take this out of scene, and I'm going to bring the power up just so you can see that it's actually firing. So we'll bring it up, and I'm going to just enable the beep. So when this fires, you can see that it's actually firing the strobe itself. So that can be okay if you're in a smaller studio at home or in your commercial space, but if you ever get into a situation at a school, at an event where you've got other people shooting, then any flash is going to trigger this. So it can be super annoying to work optically because of that triggering issue. So that's why we would use a controller, because we would be independent of any flashes going off. But let me just show you the other mode here on S1. So that's regular S1, and then S2 is just kind of a sub-variant of that. What S2 does is it ignores the pre-flash. So this could be a red eye reduction pre-flash or a TTL pre-flash. It ignores the first infrared burst and then fires with the second one. Not used very often anymore, but if you are someone who needs that, it is still there. But the best thing to do, honestly, is just use the controller, which we will get into in a second. So you can hear the beep there, and when that is enabled and I'm turning the power, it can be really annoying because it's constantly beeping. So I would recommend pushing this beep and turning that off. When we're adjusting with the controller and adjusting the power up and down, it won't actually give you those beeps every time. It'll just be a recycling beep, which is really all we want it for. Let's talk about one of the great features of the DPiiiV, and that is the LED modeling lamp. So as I mentioned before, you're never going to have to replace that modeling lamp anymore, and we can enable it by just pushing the little light bulb button, and right away you see that turns to prop. Prop just means proportional. So as I adjust the power, I bring that up or down, the modeling lamp is going to adjust proportionally. So now you can see on the background there, it's dimming out, and we can bring it all the way down to 1/64 before we would actually just go off. Moving on from prop, if we push the modeling lamp button again, we switch over to percentage, and you can see that it just went to 100% right here. Well, you might not want it 100%. That's okay. We can adjust that. And this dial here is actually a button as well. So if I push that in, you're going to see that flash. And now we can use the dial to adjust that down. Say you just want this set at 30%, no problem. If you leave that, it'll eventually lock in, or just push the dial again and it's going to lock it in there. So now, if by chance we turn the modeling lamp off, once we go back to percentage, there's our prop, there's our percentage, it stays locked where we had set it last. And if we want to bring that back up again, so again, push the dial in, adjust to wherever you want, push it again, and now it's set. So you can see, even without a reflector on, this modeling lamp is actually quite powerful. It's a 30-watt LED, which is the equivalent of roughly about 150-watt incandescent. So you can actually use this for some video work if you want. Now you're not going to light a whole scene with it, but if you're looking to use it as a fill or just, product photography or something like that, it is actually effective to use for that. So something to be aware of. That's a nice advantage of this new LED. One other thing I wanted to mention about this modeling lamp button, if I hold this in, you're going to see that little light bulb on the right pop up. So let me show you what that means. When it's enabled, if I recycle the flash, you're going to see on the background, pay attention to the background when I flash it, the modeling lamp is turning off. So each time. So that's useful. It's going to give you a visual representation if you don't want the beep on that the light has actually recycled, or there might be some other circumstances if you were shooting at a really low power, wide open or something, and you don't want the modeling lamp to affect any of the exposure. That's a rare circumstance, but that could be a situation. If we contrast that, just disable it by holding it. Now watch the background again. When I fire, that modeling lamp is just staying on. Typically, that's probably where I would leave it, but it's up to you if you find yourself in that situation. So let's just turn that off again. And again, it doesn't matter if it's off or not. It has no effect on the actual flash going off. Let's get into the radio control now. We talked about the PC Sync and the S1. Now the best way to control this strobe is definitely through the built-in radio system. So there are no additional receivers or anything you have to plug in, and that goes for most of the lights in the Godox lineup now. What you will need to pick up is a dedicated controller. So I've grabbed the brand new XPROII. You can also use the original XPRO or an X2T, or even some older legacy ones if you want. So if we want to use the wireless controller, we have a dedicated button here, and I have that enabled, and that's how it comes from the factory. This will be enabled, but if you push this, you're going to see a number of things disappear on the top. So we lost our, whoops, as I hit the strobe, we lost our channel up here, and then that little icon. And what that icon is just for legacy controllers. They used to have little dip switches, so as I change the channel, you'll see that move in a second. But you can ignore that little symbol. For most modern controllers, it doesn't need that. I'm just going to disable the beep from here first. And let's talk about this letter here. So that is our group. So when we connect to a controller, there are two things that we need to set: our group, and most importantly, actually right now, is our channel. So the channels have to match. Up here, we're on channel 1. So that means I need to set the channel on my trigger to be channel 1 as well. So let's flip this on and go ahead and do that. Again, I'm using the XPROII here, but we have dedicated videos for every controller. It's going to go into way more in depth than what I'm going to show you now. We're just going to connect quickly and move on from there. So what I need to do is I'm going to go into the menu to show you how to set the channel on the controller here. So I'm just going to go into the custom functions, and the very first one here, so you can see where it's highlighted, is that little wireless symbol. So I'm just pushing the set button to enter that. So the very first thing there is channel. So if I hit set, I can choose from 1 to 32 different channels, and it really doesn't matter which one you pick. You just have to choose one of them. Now, if you were shooting in, say, a venue where other people are shooting, This new controller has a function, and some of the other controllers have this as well. It's a scan function. So I can go down, click scan, rotate over to start, and now the controller is going to look for the best available channel without any interference. So it's going to take 10-15 seconds here and generate a list. You can't directly select it, but you'll see the numbers that it comes up with here once it's finished thinking, and we could set to one of those. So it's finished generating a list here. I'll actually choose 21. So let's go up to the controller here. So I'm just going to click the little back button, go in here into our channel, and now I'm going to choose 21. And you can do that just by scrolling the wheel around. Go back. Sorry, it's hard to see on this angle. 21. Set OK. Now we can get out of the menu. We are good to go, except that we now need to set that channel on the actual strobe because we're still on 1 over here. So if I hold the group channel button here, you're going to see that highlighted, and I have the beep enabled, which is annoying, so I'm just going to go over here, and I'll show you why that beep keeps coming back on in 1 second here. Once 21 is set, I just click that, and now we are matched. Now I have my group up here and a list of groups down here. So I can choose whatever group I want for this light, and the way I do that is just click the group button, and if I continually click it, it's going to switch, or I can use the dial and rotate through. It'll go through A, B, C, D, E, and then it's going to switch into numbers. I don't recommend using numbers. Stay with the letters. There's probably not many times you would need to expand into the numbers. So we'll leave that on A. And just a note about groups. We can have multiple lights on the same group. So everything, remember, has to be on the same channel, but if we had, say, 2 DP400 3s and we wanted to use those on the background and adjust those background lights evenly, we would put them both on A. And then our main light we would put on B, and say our fill light is on C. And then we can independently adjust those right off of the controller, and all you have to do is select the group. So I'm just pushing the button on the side here. So I would hit that, and then I can change whatever group I want, or whatever mode. So if it was a TTL light, I could enable it manual, or I could turn it off. And then all you do is you switch between them by just pushing the button. So it's super easy. I want to adjust my background lights really quick, no problem. I can adjust that as necessary. Oh, no, I need to change my main light, adjust that, perfect. So really easy, and you can tell that we're connected because it just changed there, but you could also hit the test button just to make sure that we are connected. And you can hear that that beep went off. So as I mentioned the beep before, when we enabled it on the light, every time we turned the dial, it made that noise, which was annoying. But if we adjust the power on the controller with the beep enabled, you are not going to get that beep. The only time you're going to get the beep is when we recycle. So if I hit the test button, and it's going to beep once it's ready to go. So that's no problem, but if we want to disable that beep, we can do that in the menu. I'll just show you that real quick. So just go look for the little beep symbol, which is right here. Highlight it, turn it to off, and then you can get back out. Now when we test fire, there is no beep. So you could use that modeling lamp like I showed you if you don't want, if you're shooting newborns or something, you don't want the beep to startle them. That's a great situation where you could use it. Now keep in mind, the reason why I showed you this is because anything that you set on the controller overrides what is on the strobe. So if I go and change anything on the strobe here, it doesn't matter. As soon as I push the test button here, you're going to see the power 1/4 transfer back over to the strobe. And that's the same thing that happened with the beep. When I set it on the controller, it overrides what's on the strobe. So let me just turn the beep back on here. And same thing, when I test fire that to send the signal, it's disabled it again. So just be aware of that when you're in the studio. If you adjust anything on this when you have your controller connected, the controller is always going to be in charge. So don't put yourself in a situation where you keep adjusting power and wonder why that it's changing. If something seems like it is not connecting properly, the most common issue is normally someone has set an ID in the controller or on the strobe. So let me just go over that really quick. Let's go back into our menu, and we are going to go into our first menu, which is that little wireless symbol right there. And you can see down here we have ID. So if I go into ID, I can set an ID from 1 to 99. This is kind of like a sub-channel of the channel. It just allows you to isolate this light even more to prevent any interference of someone else that is possibly using the same channel. So you could continue to use the same channel if you want, like we're on 21, but if you add an ID, it separates that out even more. And the mistake a lot of people make is if I go in here and set, say 1, let's just go back here. Now I test fire it, you can see it's not communicating with the light anymore. And all we've done is just change that ID. So people get really confused by that. Why isn't it working? I'm on the same channel. It's because you've set an ID. And you can do that on the actual light itself. It works both ways, so you could get yourself stuck either way. I'll just fire that again. You can see it reconnected. And the way we control it on the light is the custom function. So if I hit that first, the very first custom function is ID. And if I use the dial, sorry, I got to click the dial, and then I can set the ID that way. So I would recommend just leaving this off. It's very rare that you would actually find yourself in a situation that you need that kind of sub-channel. So just pay attention to that if you ever get stuck. While we're in the custom functions, let's take a look at the other custom function that we have. So I'm in custom functions, just use the dial and you can rotate. And what you see is 1/P. This is controlling our power scale. So if we go back out, I'll just show you what I mean here. That is 1/4. So quarter power, eighth power, 32nd, whatever it is, it's going to stay in that scale. So 1/1 being full power, 1/64 being minimum power. You might have an older controller or you might have an older light that uses a different power scale, something like 4 to 10, and that's where we can control this. So if I hit this on the actual light again, now I can click the dial and rotate that to P.P. And if I go back out, you can see now that that power scale is changed. Now be aware again that the controller is always in charge, so if I test fire that, you see that it just went back to quarter power. We actually need to go, if we're using the controller, and change that power scale in the menu. Now you're probably never going to do this, but just to show you what you would do is you go over to step, and then you have all different power levels where you can set it, and you're going to go into the one that shows the scale right here. So you can see it just changed back. Now when we adjust our power on the light, it's changing in that different power scale. So again, probably you don't want that. It's much easier to understand if you're using the fractions there. So let's go ahead, go back into step and turn that off. The lowest power on this strobe is 1/64. Godox makes other lights that will be 1/128 or 256 or even higher. So there is no 1/64 in this setting, so we're going to set the closest one, which is going to be 1/128. And so if I go up here, you see 1/128, 0.3. Now before we were adjusting this in 1/10 increments, but you might find that annoying. You don't need quite that precision. Can I adjust it quicker? Yes, you can. You can adjust it in third stops here. So if we select this power scale, let's get back out of here. Now, when we adjust the power, you can see on the screen there that it's going in third stops. So it adjusts much quicker, And you might not need, 1/10 increments, because honestly, those aren't going to make a huge difference that you're going to see probably. So I kind of like having, for this particular light, just having it set on thirds. So again, we can choose whatever we want. It's really just user preference. And if we don't like the third power scale, just go change it to the 0.01 back in there, and it'll go back to tenths. The last thing I wanted to show you on the controller was modeling lamp control. So each controller operates this a little bit differently. So this is specific to the XPROII. So if I hit just under that little icon there, the little modeling lamp, if I hit this, it's going to turn the modeling lamp on for all lights. So it's just set there. If I want to control the modeling lamps individually, what I need to do is just turn them all on at first, and then I can highlight that group, so I can either push the button or just hit the set button here. And now I can go in and click the modeling lamp button, and it's going to kind of filter through our different options. So we have our prop, which we talked about before, which just scales up and down with the power level. Then we can turn it off individually, or we can have our percentage. So to control the percentage individually, what I would do is hold the button down here, and then that's going to highlight, and we can use the dial to then control that modeling lamp, bringing it down to wherever we want. Click it again, that's going to set it, and I can get back off of that. Now that one is set differently than all the other ones, and if I want to turn them all on or all off again, I can flip it off, and you can see that that individual setting is saved on our group that we were using. So that's everything you need to know about the Godox DPiiiV 400 and 600 watt-second strobes. These are an awesome light at an unbeatable price. You're getting a ton of features in here, like the LED modeling lamp, the pro level mount, 7 stops of adjustable power in 1/10 increments. The list goes on. So I would make sure that you pick up the 7-inch reflector if you're wanting to use umbrellas, or even better, pick up a Strobepro Rapid Snap softbox. The other thing that you want to make sure you have is a Godox controller. And again, this is backwards compatible with basically any Godox trigger that's out there. But take a look at the XPROII, the latest one, or if you need a hot shoe mount on it, the X2T is also a great option. So check out all the different accessories that we have for these lights, the different modifiers, stands, whatever you need, we've got it at strobepro.com. So until next time, I'm Jesse, and enjoy creating.